An Explication of Truth by Gwendolyn Brooks. And if the sun comes, how shall we greet him? Shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him after so lengthy a session with shade? Though we have wept for him, though we have prayed all through the night years, what if we wake one shimmering morning to hear the fierce hammering of his firm knuckles hard on the door? Shall we not shudder? Shall we not flee into the shelter, the dear, thick shelter of the familiar propitious haze? Sweet is it to sleep in the coolness of unawareness. The dark hangs heavily over the eyes. Now that I've read through the poem, let's get to the explication, starting with the first two lines. And if the sun comes, how shall we greet him? Here, you can already see that Brooks is going to be using the sun as an almost personified metaphor throughout this poem, which is a common poetic device she uses in her works, such as when she used it in Speech to the Young, Speech to the Progress Toward. Moving on with the lines, shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him after so lengthy a session with shade? Here, she almost begins to villainize the sun for forcing everyone out from the darkness that they've lived in for so long. She worries that the change will be too shockingly different from what the world is used to. Now, before moving on, I think it's necessary to mention that much of Brooks's poetry relates to her civil rights activism as an African American woman, so it can be inferred that the change she is describing is the long-awaited change regarding civil rights and equality. This long wait is demonstrated in the next stanza, where she writes, "Though we have wept for him, though we have prayed all through the night years." She shows how desperate the people have been for change, how long they've waited for it. But then she almost backtracks with the rest of this stanza and the next one, stating, "What if we wake one shimmering morning to hear the fierce hammering of his firm knuckles hard on the door? Shall we not shudder? Shall we not flee into the shelter, the dear thick shelter of the familiar propitious haze?" She goes back into her fear and indecisiveness of this change and what it's really made out to be. She talks of fleeing to shelter, and her choice of word, flee, is important to the meaning as well. The word flee itself has such negative connotations. It paints a picture of running breathlessly away from something absolutely terrifying, fear rooted in your heart. And the last few lines, speaking of the dear thick shelter of the familiar propitious haze, gives the image of people running back to a place where things are unclear and messy, but where they still feel safe. She continues to describe the place where people feel safe in the last two stanzas, which say, sweet is it to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness. The dark hangs heavily over the eyes." It's so easy for the people she is describing to run and hide in the darkness or the night before the dawn of change, blinding themselves from the sunlight out of fear for change. But I don't think that's what Brooks is telling anyone to do here. She's instead warning the reader of this easy way out from worldly change. And as a reader myself, what I take from this poem in the end is that you cannot let yourself hide from the dawning of a new day of progress.